محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله بارئ الخلائق الأجمعين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء حبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم محمد. ثم الصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين، لا سيما ولي الله الحجة ابن الحسن صاحب الأمر والزمان. اللهم صل على روحي وأرواح العالمين له الفداء، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين. صلى الله عليك يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، صلى الله عليك يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة، يا غريب الغرباء، يا مظلوم كربلاء. السلام على من جعل الله الشفاء في تربته. السلام على من الإجابة تحت قبته. السلام على ساكن كربلاء. فيا ليتنا ثم يا ليتنا كنا معكم سادتي، يا سادتي، فنفوز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد، قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الحكيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله اشتفى آدم ونوحا وآل إبراهيم وآل عمران على العالمين. صدق الله العلي العظيم وآمنا به. نوروا مجالسكم بذكر محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل bila zahma. I know you've been moving forward 2 or 3 times. If you can move forward one more time, give the other mu'mineen a chance to participate in the majlis of Imam al-Hussain. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. إخواني، ليلة العاشوراء This is perhaps one of the most difficult nights that fell upon Ahlul Bayt. إن هذا يوم فرحت به آل زياد وآل مروان بقتلهم الحسين. 9th day of Muharram was when the siege over Imam al-Hussain reached its peak. Final contingency of 70,000 men from this entire army of 70,000 men, the final contingency under the leadership of Shimr bin Joshan La'natullahi alayhi reaches Karbala. And they celebrated the fact that they have placed Sayyid al-Shuhada under siege to an extent that there can be no one else that can come from outside of Karbala to support him. Day like this, a night like this, you and I need to be living Karbala. You and I need to be living this grief. Grief over Imam al-Hussain is not restricted just for the time that you are sitting in a majlis. No. Before you come to the majlis, after you leave the majlis, how you spend your entire night, how you spend your day tomorrow, your attitude, your behavior. Ya akhi, lest the malaika find you in vain talk and jokes and banter, and they find you laughing, and you are placed, or we are placed in that category. هذا يوم فرحت به آل زياد وآل مروان. On a night like this, Habibi, your heart is in Karbala. Your heart is with Sayyid al-Shuhada. And it is as if this night, even though you're here in Manchester, but enter with your heart, your love takes you to Karbala, and you're doing tawaf around the haram of Sayyid al-Shuhada and the haram of Abu al-Fadl. Until the purity of your heart takes you to Bayn al-Haramain. Until with your heart today, you sit outside the khaymaga of Aba Abdullah. And you prepare yourself for tomorrow. The tamanna of every believer, mentality of every person is that he says, فَيَا لَيْتَنِي كُنْتُ مَعَكُمْ فَأَفُوزَ فَوْزًا عَظِيمًا. Come and receive the day of Ashura with this mentality that you are pledging bay'ah to Sayyid al-Shuhada. And you say to him, even though we were not born on the day of Ashura, here we are today pledging our allegiance and our loyalty to you. On a night like this, companions pledged their allegiance to Imam al-Hussain. On the night of Muharram, the narrations mention that Imam al-Hussain surveyed the entire plains of Karbala, the battlefield. And he began to move his tents, and he ordered his companions to rearrange the tents such that they would all be closer to each other. The tents are separated and scattered. They become easy targets for the enemies from every direction. For Sayyid al-Shuhada commanded for the tents to be brought closer to each other, in the same way that you see in the Khaymaga today or in the Mukhayyam in Karbala, such that the tent of Imam al-Hussain and the women was in the center, surrounded by the tents of Bani Hashim, which were then surrounded by a wider circle, and that's the tents of the companions. And then Imam al-Hussain surveyed and went into the Maidan and surveyed the battlefield. Which direction of the Maidan would he direct or use in the battle to his advantage? So he went out in the darkness of the night. Karbala had plains, it had plateaus, like the way you have the till, known as the till Zainabiyya. And he monitored which area of Karbala would be suitable in order to defend themselves and in order to perform this great jihad that would change the direction of mankind. For Imam al-Hussain noticed that the eastern side of the tents are marked with valleys and plateaus and mountains and palm trees. And this part of the plains of Karbala would form or would serve as a beneficial place for the enemies to hide and ambush. For Imam al-Hussain ensured that the battle would take place where the Maidan is open and open ground, keeping in mind the battle format he had selected for himself. These were men who have participated in war. This is the son of that Haydar al-Karrar who has spent his life defending the principles of Islam by way of jihad. And as he was surveying the lands in the darkness of the night, he is with his companion Nafi. He tells Nafi, "Oh Nafi, 3 days you have experienced hunger and thirst. And these armies are here to kill me. If they find me and they get a hold of me, they will not kill you. Nafi, flee in the darkness of the night, and I shall attest for you in front of Allah that you fulfilled your purpose towards me." Nafi says to him, "Ya Aba Abdullah, and how can I desert you at this final moment?" Refuse to leave. The companions of Sayyid al-Shuhada were not looking for Jannah, ya akhi. They were looking for something greater than Jannah, and that is companionship and proximity with Ahlul Bayt for eternity. There is no Jannah and no value of Jannah if that Jannah is free of Ahlul Bayt. Companions at a level. And the narrations mention that Imam al-Hussain, after having brought together all the tents, commanded his companions to dig a trench from the southern side of the Khaymaga. And the idea was that this trench would be dug in a semicircle shape. An entire khandak was dug. And it was then filled with firewood and the stumps of the palm trees. And on the day of Ashura, after the time of Fajr, Imam al-Hussain commanded his companions to light this khandak and set it on fire. And the reason for this was that Imam al-Hussain was protecting the women, with 72 odd men and another 30 who converted and 100 odd people, facing 70,000. Rather than to risk and be ambushed from every direction, Imam al-Hussain limited the enemy in terms of the directions through which they would be able to attack him, such that the eastern plains had plateaus and stumps. They could not come 70,000 mass forces at one time. And on the southern side, the Imam al-Hussain had dug a khandak and lit it on fire, such that the enemies would not be able to perform a counter-attack and attack Imam al-Hussain from the back, or attack the women while the men are defending themselves. For you find that the hikmah and the strategy that Imam al-Hussain used just in setting up this format, and then how he divided his own army into 3 ranks, inshallah, we shall discuss tomorrow. But this day of Ashura, this night of Ashura, and the upcoming day is a day where each and every one of us, filled with grief, and our attitude reflects this. The day of Ashura is an exception, such that on the day of Ashura you don't even say salam, even though salam is from akhlaq. To shake hands with the mu'mineen is thawab and sins are forgiven, but this day of Ashura, even you don't shake hands. And you look at each other and you weep and you say, A'adham Allah, lakal ajra. And remember your 12th Imam. And Ziyarat Ash, and Ziyarat Nahiya. As we said a few nights back, he addresses his grandfather Imam al-Hussain and he says to him, فَلَأَدُّبَنَّكَ صَبَاحًا وَمَسَاءً وَلَأَبْكِيَنَّ عَلَيْكَ بَدَلَ الدُّمُوعِ دَمًا حَسْرَةً عَلَيْكَ. Imam al-Hujjah says to his grandfather Imam al-Hussain, I shall lament you every morning and evening, and I shall weep for you tears of blood until I die from this choking grief. Imam al-Hussain or Imam al-Hujjah is saying, I'm choking to death because of the intensity of this grief. For remember your Imam of your time and grant bay'ah to him and console him. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. The day of Karbala, the day of Ashura, the sacrifice of Imam al-Hussain, Ahibba'i, is a sacrifice that is unmatched in the entire Islamic history. And you find that the sacrifice of Imam al-Hussain surpasses the sacrifices of the Anbiya in their entirety. And we attest to this reality in Ziyarat Waritha. Assalamu alayka ya Waritha Adam Safwatillah. Assalamu alayka ya Waritha Nuhin Nabiyallah. Assalamu alayka ya Waritha Ibrahim Khalilullah. When you refer to Imam al-Hussain as being the Warith of all these Anbiya, what is meant by the word Warith? Successor to an extent, but the reality of the word warith, ya'ni salam on that Hussain who ensured the legacy of these previous Anbiya. Yani Nabi Ibrahim was the founder. Nabi Ibrahim is known, is given the title as being the founder of Tawheed. If Nabi Ibrahim was the founder of Tawheed, then no, Imam al-Hussain was the savior of Tawheed. And the maqam of the savior is much higher and elevated than the maqam of the founder. In fact, you find that there are many similarities in the seerah of Nabi Ibrahim and in the seerah of Imam al-Hussain. There are many similarities in the persecution of Nabi Ibrahim and in the persecution of Imam al-Hussain. There are many similarities in the sacrifices of Nabi Ibrahim and in the sacrifices of Imam al-Hussain. But Allah, where is the sacrifice of Nabi Ibrahim and where is the sacrifice of Abu Abdullah al-Hussain? And tonight we try to understand the azama of Imam al-Hussain through the manhaj and by comparing his manhaj to the manhaj of Nabi Ibrahim. You find that one of the titles that is given to Nabi Ibrahim is that of Khalilullah. Ibrahim Khalilullah. فإن إلى الشرائع Shaykh Saduq mentions a hadith on authority of Imam al-Rida salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Apologize for the inconvenience. One more time, the request is if you're able to move back, the brothers who are coming have a spot to sit. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Imam was asked, on what basis did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala elevate the status of Nabi Ibrahim such that he became a Khalilullah? Khalilullah, with intense friendship and proximity. He says, he asked the Imam, on what basis, what did Nabi Ibrahim do such that he was elevated to the status of Khalilullah? Imam al-Rida replies by saying, اتخذ الله, يعني إبراهيم اتخذ الله خليلا لأنه لم يرد أحدا قط وَلَمْ يَسْأَلُ أَحَدًا فِي بِشَيْءٍ or بِشَيْءٍ قَطْ. Imam Rida says that Allah elevated the status of Nabi Ibrahim to Khalilullah because of two things, because of two characters. The first character is that Nabi Ibrahim never turned down a beggar. Nabi Ibrahim never turned down somebody seeking help. Yani the generosity and the extent of the generosity of Nabi Ibrahim made him mahboob to the extent that Allah made him Khalilullah. And in addition to that, Nabi Ibrahim never asked or never relied upon anyone for anything. And this reflected the peak of tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For these two characters, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made Nabi Ibrahim Khalilullah. And if Nabi Ibrahim was elevated to the maqam of Khalilullah because of generosity and tawakkul, then Imam al-Hussain and Abu Abdullah alayhi salam is more awla of the title Khalilullah because of his generosity and his tawakkul. Where is the generosity of Nabi Ibrahim and where is the generosity of Sayyid al-Shuhada? The narrations mention on the 11th of Muharram, when the enemies were leaving from Karbala and the body of Imam al-Hussain and his companions lay on the plains of Karbala decapitated. What happened to the body of Imam al-Hussain? Allahu Akbar. 114 wounds just from swords. A head that is severed from the body. And on top of that, they trampled the body of Sayyid al-Shuhada. After all this, the enemies find wounds on the back of Imam al-Hussain because they took pride in looking at the body of Imam al-Hussain and boasting about how many wounds they've been able to inflict on the body of your master. For as they were looking at all the wounds and boasting and bragging about who has done what to the body of Imam al-Hussain, they see that on the back of Sayyid al-Shuhada there are scars and bruises, and they were not able to recognize these bruises. They are not bruises or scars from stones or from spears or from swords or from arrows. And they wondered, where are these bruises? What are these bruises from? Nobody had an answer. So they called Sajjad alayhi salam, Imam Zainul Abidin in shackles, comes and they ask him, where are or what are these marks and from where are these wounds or these scars or these bruises? Where did they come from on the back of your father? Imam Sajjad says, these are the bruises that my father incurred in his lifetime due to carrying sacks of food in the darkness of the night and distributing them for the masakin and the fuqara. A lifetime of generosity such that you carry heavy weights of rice and flour on your back such that your back is permanently bruised. You can imagine what weights and how long it takes such that your back is permanently scarred or bruised. This is the generosity of Sayyid al-Shuhada. In fact, the generosity of Imam al-Hussain knows no bounds. Once it is mentioned that he was walking past one of the gardens in Medina, and it was a garden that he owned, or in this narration, a garden that belonged to somebody else. He was passing through it, and he sees there is a young boy with a piece of bread, and there is a stray dog sitting next to this boy. Imam al-Hussain stops to watch. He sees that this young boy, he takes a piece of the bread, he eats one piece, he breaks a piece and he feeds it to the dog. And Imam al-Hussain looked at him. After the boy fed the dog, Imam al-Hussain goes to him and he says to him, oh boy, why did you do what you were doing? Why were you feeding this stray dog? He says to Abu Abdullah al-Hussain, I saw a dog struggling in the hunger and whining and moaning next to me. And I felt ashamed that I should eat bread while this dog is looking at me. So out of the kindness of my heart, I fed the dog. Imam al-Hussain, to thank him for his akhlaq, it turned out that this boy was a slave of a Jewish man and woman, followers of Bani Israel. Imam al-Hussain goes and speaks to the masters of this boy. He frees the boy. He pays for their lump sum money to free this slave. He goes, he frees the slave, and not only does he free the slave, he buys the entire garden and makes the boy the owner of this garden. When these two companions, man and woman from Bani Israel, see the generosity of Imam al-Hussain, they inquire about him. These followers of Bani Israel come into the fold of Islam and accept the imamat of Sayyid al-Shuhada. Imam al-Hussain is that person whose generosity doesn't stop in his zahiri life. Even after his shahada, the generosity of Imam al-Hussain is evident. Imam al-Hujjah says that the qubba of Imam al-Hussain is such that if you do dua under the qubba of Imam al-Hussain, your du'as are hatman mustajab. This kubbah of Sayyid al-Shuhada is such that sometimes for us, du'as are not accepted because what we are asking for is detrimental and is going to be harmful for us. But Habibi, enter, go and do a ziyarah or ask dua under the dome of Imam al-Hussein. If what you are asking for is going to impact you negatively, Sayyid al-Shuhada will ensure your destiny is changed in order for this dua to be mustajab. As-salamu ala man al-ijabatu tahta qubbati. The generosity of Imam al-Hussein where? And the generosity of Nabi Ibrahim where? Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. When you find and you read through the Quran and you look at these similarities in the manhaj between Nabi Ibrahim and Imam al-Hussein, you refer to Surah Al-Anbiya from verse number 65. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. ثم نكشوا على رؤوسهم لقد علمت ما هؤلاء ينطقون قال أفتعبدون من دون الله ما لا ينفعكم شيئا ولا يضركم أف لكم ولما تعبدون من دون الله أفلا تعقلون. Nabi Ibrahim rebukes Namrud and the followers of Namrud, and he says to them, what is wrong with you? How do you worship a Lord who cannot benefit you, a Lord who cannot harm you? Do you not have the faculty of the intellect? Uffin lakum wa lima ta'buduna min Allah. Woe be unto you and woe unto that Lord who you worship. How did they respond? Namrud. قالوا حركوه وانشروا إلى آلهتكم إن كنتم فاعلين. When they had no answer to the da'wah of Nabi Ibrahim, Namrud said, build a fire and burn him alive. And you find that this is the seerah and this is the manhaj of every dictator and every tyrant and every dhalim in the dunya. That when you approach them with ilm and mantiq and non-violence and dalil, they have no answers, they have no dalil, they have no mantiq. They resort back to you with violence. And the same thing with Imam al-Hussein. Imam al-Hussein invited them towards Tawheed. Imam al-Hussein invited them towards the Imamah. On the day of Ashura, he says to them, and how do you select a person such as Ibn Ziyad or Yazid as a Khalifa? A person who will not benefit you in the dunya nor in the akhirah, rather harm you in the dunya and harm you in the akhirah. Woe be upon you and woe upon that Khalifa who you give bay'ah to. Read through the khutbahs of Imam al-Hussein, the general message in the khutbah of Imam al-Hussein and the general message in the bayanat of Nabi Ibrahim. You see that they are parallel to each other. Nabi Ibrahim is establishing Tawheed, the existence of Allah, necessity of submitting to Allah, and Imam al-Hussein is also doing the same thing, inviting people towards submitting towards the command of Allah by submitting to the command of the wali of Allah. How Namrud responded to Nabi Ibrahim with violence and trying to burn him alive. Same thing Imam al-Hussein. After khutbahs, Umar ibn Sa'ad says, we are bored and we are tired of listening to your speech. He launches an arrow into his bow and he shoots the first arrow that pierced the tents of the women, and he proudly raised his hand and said to the army, bear witness in front of Yazid that I was the first one to shoot the arrow towards the tents of Imam al-Hussein. Hi, manhaj Namrud, same manhaj of Ibn Ziyad and Shimr and Umar ibn Sa'ad and Yazid al-La'in. When Nabi Ibrahim was thrown into the fire, when he was being thrown into the fire from a catapult, Because the narrations mention that the fire was a farsakh long into the skies, span of 3-4 kilometers. The firewood that they had put was 4 kilometers into the sky, and they couldn't even come next to the fire. They needed to get a catapult. They tied Nabi Ibrahim and they catapulted him into the fire. The narrations mention, hadith mention, that when they were launching and they were going to throw Nabi Ibrahim into the fire, Jibreel comes down to Nabi Ibrahim and he says to him, Ya Ibrahim, if you want one command from you, and I and the forces of the Malaika will save you from this burning fire. Nabi Ibrahim looks at Jibreel and he says, as for you, I don't need anything for you, but if I need help from my Lord. The hadith says, so he recited the dua, Ya Allah, Ya Wahid, Ya Ahad, Ya Samad, Ya Lam Yalid wa Lam Yulad, As'aluka bihaqqi محمد وعلي وفاطمة والحسن والحسين لما نجيتني من النار. He says, Ya Allah, Ya Ahad, Ya Samad, Ya Lam Yalid wa Lam Yulad. We attest the Tawheed of Allah, the one, the only, who cannot be given life to, who does not give birth and who was not given birth to. It says, Ya Allah, I ask you by the sake of Muhammad and Ali and Fatima and Hussain, save me from this fire. Nabi Ibrahim has done dua to Allah by the sake of Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, save me from the fire. What is the answer? Allah replies to the dua of Nabi Ibrahim by saying, Qulna ya naru kuni bardan wa salaman ala Ibrahim. The narrations mention that when Nabi Ibrahim was launched into the fire was made cool and cold for him, such that he was shivering due to the coldness of the breeze. Yani by the barakat of Ali Muhammad, you can even strip the property of fire from him.
Salat ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad.
For you find that just like the way Nabi Ibrahim, when he was being attacked by Namrud and his life was in jeopardy in that he was going to be burnt alive in the fire, yani under attack. Just like the way Nabi Ibrahim, when he was under attack, Nabi Ibrahim refused to seek the help of the Malaika. Same thing happened in Karbala on the day of Ashura for Imam al-Hussain. The narrations mention that when Imam was alone in the Maidan after everyone has been killed, Jibreel comes down to Imam al-Hussain and he says to him, Ya Aba Abdullah, Ya Ibn Rasulullah, your imtihan is tamam, your imtihan is complete. You have given everything that was possible. You have surpassed the examination of Allah in terms of sabr and in terms of submission. And now Allah has given you a choice. With one command, Ya Aba Abdullah, the entire army of the Malaika will descend upon the earth and swallow up this enemy on one command, Ya Aba Abdullah. Imam al-Hussain replied by saying, from the angels we want nothing, but if with the shedding of my blood the religion of Allah will be eternal, then let my blood be shed for Allah. Over there, Ibrahim refuses the help of the Malaika, and over here the Warith of Ibrahim refuses the help of the Malaika in Karbala. Allahu Akbar. Nabi Ibrahim, when he was being catapulted into the fire, resorted to dua, Ya Allah, Ya Wahid, Ya Ahad, Ya Samad. Same thing Imam al-Hussain, when he was covered with wounds on the plains of Karbala, he raises his hands in supplication. Ya Rajai fi iddati, oh my hope in difficulties. Ya Allah, do you and I need to build this level of Iman in Allah and follow in these footsteps of Ahlul Bayt. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. You find that in regards to the comparisons between Nabi Ibrahim and Imam al-Hussain, the generosity of Nabi Ibrahim on one side, the generosity of Imam al-Hussain on one side. The fact that Nabi Ibrahim refused the help of Jibreel when he was going to be catapulted in the fire, and over here Imam al-Hussain refuses the help of the Malaika when he was surrounded by the enemies. Ibrahim alayhi salam, the peak of reliance on Allah. Imam al-Hussain, the peak of the peak when it comes to reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then you find that there is this element of imtihan and the intensity of the imtihan. Look at how Allah tests Nabi Ibrahim. In Surah Al-Safat, He says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Rabbi habli min as-salihin fabashsharnahu bi ghulamin halim. Nabi Ibrahim does dua, Ya Allah, bless me with a son. Allah says, so we gave him glad tidings of a son who would be the best of sons and the most honorable of sons, yani Ismail. فَلَمَّا بَلَغَ مَعَهُ السَّعْيَ فَلَمَّا بَلَغَ مَعَهُ السَّعْيَ قَالَ يَا بُنَيَّ إِنِّي أَرَى فِي الْمَنَامِ إِنِّي أَذْبَحُكَ فَانظُرْ مَاذَا تَرَى قَالَ يَا أَبَتِ افْعَلْ مَا تُؤْمَرُ سَتَجِدُونِي إِنْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ مِنَ الصَّابِرِينَ. After Allah blesses Nabi Ibrahim with a son called Ismail, Nabi Ibrahim sees in a dream that Allah has commanded him to an imtihan. Allah has subjected him to an imtihan where Allah wants to test the loyalty and the submission of Ibrahim. So he says to him, Allah commands Nabi Ibrahim in a dream that your imtihan is that you have to sacrifice your son Ismail. Allahu Akbar. For Nabi Ibrahim goes to his son Ismail. He says to Ismail, I have been commanded by Allah to sacrifice you, to kill you, in order to gain the pleasure of Allah. What is your reaction, my son? Ismail said to him, Satajiduni insha'Allah min as-sabirin. Ismail said to his father, oh father, if you have to kill me to prove or to establish your submission and your loyalty to Allah, then I am happy to be killed, oh father. Now compare this stance between Ibrahim and Ismail and the stance between and the discussion or the dialogue between between Imam al-Hussain and Ali al-Akbar. Allah. Before they reach Karbala, and one of the villages before they reach Karbala, Imam al-Hussain begins to recite, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, multiple times. Ali al-Akbar comes to his father, Aba Abdullah alayhi salam. He says to him, oh father, why is it that I hear you repeating this verse, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un? Imam al-Hussain says to him, oh my son Ali, I saw in my dream that a group of men are marching in one direction, and I see that death is marching towards them in another direction. They clash and the forces of death overcome these forces. And from this dream I understood that we are marching towards our death. Ali al-Akbar says to Imam al-Hussain, oh my father, are we not on the path of truth? Imam al-Hussain says to him, and there is no doubt there is no doubt that we are on the path of truth. Ali al-Akbar says to his father, if we are on haqq, Ya Allah, then I do not care whether I march towards death or death marches towards me. Where is the response of Ismail and where is the response of Ali al-Akbar? Ismail tells his father, if we are on the path of haqq, then I will have sabr. Ali al-Akbar tells his father that if we are on the path of haqq, what sabr? We marched in the face of death. Manhaj and the seerah of Nabi Ibrahim and Ismail and the seerah of Rasul, or the seerah of Imam al-Hussain and Ali al-Akbar. And the narrations mention that when Nabi Ibrahim was actually going to sacrifice Ismail, Shaitan appeared to him 3 times, which is why in Hajj you have these 3 jamarat. This is one of the reasons out of many. There is tafsir and ta'weel. One of the reasons of the jamarat is that you stone the shaitan. And subhanallah, what we were saying yesterday, between brackets, in this issue of determination and wafa and loyalty, sometimes we feel that shaitan is too powerful and the powers of shahwa and the temptations are too strong. But take a lesson from Hajj. When you go to Jamarat and you stone the shaitan, you take 7 pebbles. What are the sizes of the pebbles that you take? According to the Manasik al-Hajj, ya akhi, the pebbles are supposed to be small pebbles, the size of this first line within your finger or so. And you chuck them on the shaitan. Why is the size of the pebble so small? This is Allah showing you that enter with your determination, you can be so powerful. If you as a human being are so strong, it needs the most smallest form of determination to counter the strongest and most powerful of shayateen. In any case, Nabi Ibrahim is going to sacrifice his son Ismail. 3 times shaitan comes to him to try and deter him, and 3 times Nabi Ibrahim counters him away. For you find that shaitan tried and challenged Nabi Ibrahim. He tried to use his emotions. He says to Ibrahim that you are a father. What type of cruel person could you be such that you kill your son? Nabi Ibrahim says to him, this is the command of my Lord. In my dream, Iblis says to him, that wasn't Allah, that was Iblis. Ajib. But Nabi Ibrahim was steadfast. So the point here is what? That Iblis tried to lower down the maqam of Nabi Ibrahim, to be a deterrent and to be a barrier in his imtihan, which Nabi Ibrahim passed. And in the same way, Iblis came on the plains of Karbala to try and deter the patience of Imam al-Hussain. But Imam al-Hussain soared only higher and higher. Hadith mentions that in the final moments, Iblis al-La'in comes to Karbala on the plains, and he sees that nothing is able to move Imam al-Hussain. Iblis cries out to Allah, Ya Allah. This is Iblis saying, Iblis says, Ya Allah, I have doubt on the sincerity of your hujjah. Ajib. After Imam al-Hussain has given everything, Iblis says, Ya Allah, I doubt in the sincerity and I doubt in the steadfastness of this hujjah, yani of Hussain. Allah says, and how? Iblis says to him, if you were to increase the heat of Karbala, your hujjah will give up your faith for water. Allah Azza wa Jalla says, you do not know my hujjah. He is created from the same teen of Muhammad and Ali, because the first nur Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created was the nur of Rasulullah, and from the nur of Rasulullah he created the nur of Imam Ali, and from these 2 nurs he created all the other nurs of Ahlul Bayt. Allah says to him, this is a creation, and the nur from the same nur of Muhammad and Ali. The narration mentions that Allah Allah increased the heat 70-fold on the day of Ashura. This did not wither or deter Imam al-Hussain, rather it made Imam al-Hussain more stronger and higher and elevated in his dependence to Allah. And similarly, everyone and anyone who joins under the banner of Imam al-Hussain gains his tawfiq at najah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. There is a request again, if you can kindly move forward. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. You find that similarities in the sacrifices even between Nabi Ibrahim and Ismail and Imam al-Hussain and his children. And the surah goes on to say, Surah Al-Safat, after Nabi Ismail accepts and he says that I will be sabir, you will find me from the sabirin. Allah goes on to discuss how the sacrifice of Nabi Ibrahim happened towards Ismail. He says, فَلَمَّا أَسْلَمَا وَتَلَّهُ لِلْجَبِينِ وَنَادَيْنَاهُ أَنْ يَا إِبْرَاهِيمُ قَدْ صَدَقْتَ الرُّؤْيَا إِنَّا كَذَلِكَ نُجْزِي الْمُحْسِنِينَ. The Quran says, and the interpreters, the Mufassirin say that when Nabi Ibrahim was taking his son Ismail to sacrifice him, this was very difficult for Ibrahim to do. This is my son. How do I sever his jugular veins? How do I slaughter my own son? So the hadith says that when he actually went to the place, Nabi Ibrahim commanded his son to go into a position of sujood. He told Ismail, go into a position of sajda. And I want you to put your cheek on the ground. Turn your face away from me. Because if I look at you, I will not have the courage to sacrifice you. So he did that. فَلَمَّا أَسْلَمَا وَتَلَّهُ لِلْجَبِينِ. The narration says that when Ibrahim was going to slaughter Ismail, he didn't have the courage to look at his son, so he looked up towards the heaven. And he said, Bismillah wa billah, and he moved the knife across the neck. But when Allah had seen that Ibrahim has reached a level of loyalty and submission to the extent that he is willing to sacrifice his own son, then Jibreel came down with a kabsh, with a lamb, and he put it in between the neck of Ismail and the blade or the knife of Ibrahim, such that the sheep became sacrificed or the lamb became sacrificed in place of Ismail. Ya Ibrahim, come to Karbala. Allah, Ya Ibrahim, come to Karbala. You couldn't stand to see a knife at the neck of Ismail, so you turned your face. Come to Karbala and look at the imtihan of Hussain. How did Imam al-Hussain see Ali al-Akbar in the position in which he was? Allah says for Nabi Ibrahim, Inna hada lahu al-bala'ul mubin. This sacrifice of Ibrahim, this imtihan of Ibrahim was bala'ul ameen. But the sacrifice and the imtihan of Imam al-Hussain, and as a result his daraja is much higher than that of Ibrahim, because the bala was much more than that of Ibrahim. The Quran goes on to say, وَفَدَيْنَاهُ بِذِبْحٍ عَظِيمٍ. and we ransomed the life for a dhibhun adhim, for a great sacrifice. Imam al-Rida in Uyun al-Akhbar, or Imam al-Rida in his hadith, it is narrated in Uyun al-Akhbar and in a number of the tafasir, including Tafsir al-Safi, where it mentions that the dhibhul adhim in the Quran is Imam al-Hussain. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. They say that Imam al-Hussain is not mentioned in the Quran, and Ashura is not mentioned in the Quran. Ya akhi, tafsir of the Quran states that Dhibhul Azim in Surah Al-Safat is Abu Abdullah al-Hussain. How? Imam goes on to explain. When the sheep was slaughtered, or the lamb was slaughtered, or the calf, whatever you want to call it, was slaughtered, it was divinely sent down and was slaughtered instead of Ismail. And Ibrahim alayhi salam had passed his imtihan. But Nabi Ibrahim felt sad and he felt sorrowful. He said, Ya Allah, much as I'm happy, the life of my son was spared by you. But if I would have experienced the grief of the death of my son, due to my submission towards you, my daraja would be much higher. Look at what Nabi Ibrahim is saying. Look at the level at which they're speaking. For Nabi Ibrahim says, if my grief would have been greater, my daraja would have been higher. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to Nabi Ibrahim, Ya Ibrahim, who is the most beloved creature to you? Who is the most beloved creation to you? Nabi Ibrahim says, Ya Allah, there is no one more beloved to me than your Habib Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Nabi Ibrahim knew who was Rasulullah even before Rasulullah was born. This is not something new. There were nur that were created ages and years before the creation of all the Anbiya. And Nabi Ibrahim knew of the status of Rasulullah. Baba, he did his tawassul to be safe in the fire to begin with. So Allah asks Ibrahim, Ya Ibrahim, who is the most beloved creation to you? He says, Ya Rasulullah, without doubt, your Habib Rasulullah. He says, then after that, he says, the family of this Habib, the family of Rasulullah, Ahlul Bayt, Ali Hassan Hussain and Sayyidat Nisa'il Alameen. For Allah asks Nabi Ibrahim, what would be more painful for you? What would constitute of more grief for you? The fact, the grief or the pain of you having killed your son or sacrificed your son with your own hands out of submission to me? Will this be more painful for you? Or will it be more painful for you to see the son of this Rasulullah, yani Imam al-Hussain, being surrounded by enemies and being slaughtered like a sheep with all cruelty from those people who are the worst of the worst on earth? Nabi Ibrahim said, Ya Allah, by far the death and the killing of the grandson of Rasulullah at the hands of the kuffar is more painful for me than the grief of me having sacrificed my own son. So Allah said to him, we have ransomed and we saved the life of Ismail, because from his lineage will be that Hussain who will then be the Dhibhul Azim and the source of guidance for all humanity. As a result of this, Ibrahim cried and wept over the tragedy of Karbala. وَإِذِ ابْتَلَى إِبْرَاهِيمَ رَبُّهُ بِكَلِمَاتٍ فَأَتَمَّهُنَّ. What was this kalimat? The weeping of Ibrahim over the tragedy of Imam al-Hussain, which then elevated him to the maqam of Imam. Sometimes people come forward and they say to us that, how can you compare the Imam to the Nabi? This is a form of ghulu. Actually, first, the definition of ghulu has nothing to do with this comparison between A'imma and the Prophets. And the Quran in itself is daleel that the martaba of an Imam is greater than the martaba of a Nabi, with the exception of Rasulullah, because he was a Nabi and an Imam. This in itself is a debate on a discussion on Majlis on its own, and perhaps we recited it before. But kafi for daleel that one of the titles of Imam al-Hussain is Sayyid Shabab Ahlil Jannah, the master of Jannah. Even that Jannah which Ibrahim will go to, the master of that Jannah is Hussain. For do not doubt in fada'il and merits like these. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Where was the sacrifice of Ibrahim and where is the sacrifice of Imam al-Hussain? The narrations mention this Ali al-Akbar alayhi salam represented and resembled Rasulullah in everything. In the manner that he looked, in the manner that he walked, in the manner that he talked, in his dealings, in his behavior, in his akhlaq, and in his complexion and his features. He was a representation of Rasulullah, such that Imam al-Hussain says every time we missed Rasulullah and we wanted to do the ziyarah of Rasulullah, we would look at this Ali al-Akbar. On the day of Ashura, Imam al-Hussain gets together with his companions for Salatul Fajr, and Ali al-Akbar gives that adhan, and it is as if Rasulullah himself is giving adhan on the plains of Karbala. The narrations mention that as the day of Ashura progressed, and each and every one of the companions of Imam al-Hussain gave their sacrifice and were shaheed in his way. And then came the time of the Bani Hashim. Ulama or muhakkikeen or historians have differences of opinion on who was the first shaheed from Bani Hashim. And a number of historians come forward and they say that the first shaheed of Bani Hashim was Ali al-Akbar. And Imam al-Hussain wanted his son to be sacrificed in front of his own eyes before any one of the blood of Bani Hashim was spilled. The narrations mention that when Ali al-Akbar came to bid farewell and seek permission from his father Aba Abdullah, the narration mentions Imam al-Hussain hugged Ali al-Akbar and he cried until both of them fell down to the ground. Imam al-Hussain stood up. Allah, and now it is as if Habibi, you are in Karbala, you are next to the Mukhayyam, and you are watching how Imam al-Hussain does this wida to Ali al-Akbar, and it is as if you are accompanying Ali al-Akbar in the Maidan. Your hearts are in Karbala. The narration mentioned that Imam al-Hussain stood up and then he made Ali al-Akbar wear his breastplate. He helped Ali al-Akbar put on his amama. Allah, he looked at Ali al-Akbar for a final time. Ali al-Akbar then mounted his horse and he started to ride his horse towards the battlefield. The narrations mention that Sayyid al-Shuhada was standing by the doors of the Khaymaga, and as Ali al-Akbar was riding into the battlefield, he raised his hands and he said, Ya Allah, Allahumma ishhad ala ha'ula'i al-qawm faqad baraza ilayhim ghulamun ashbahu an-nas khulqan wa khalqan wa mantiqan bi Rasulillah. Imam al-Hussain raised his hands towards the heaven and he said, Ya Allah, be witness that a person, Yani Ali al-Akbar, the one who represents Rasulullah the closest in his akhlaq and in his features, has gone towards this call. And then Imam al-Hussain recited the verse of the Quran, Inna Allah astafa Adam wa Nuhan wa ala Ibrahim wa ala Imran ala al-alameen. The narrations mention that Imam Ali al-Akbar went into the Maidan on his horse and he he began to attack the enemies fiercely, attacking them from the right wing and attacking them from the left wing. All this time he was reciting his poetry and introducing himself towards the kuffar. He entered into the battlefield crying out, Inni ana Ali ibn al-Hussain ibn Ali, nahnu wa baytullahi awla bin Nabi. Ali al-Akbar cries out and says, indeed, I am Ali, the son of Hussain and the son of Ali. We are the ones who are closest in proximity towards Rasulullah. Tallahi la yahkumu baynana ibn al-Da'i. He says, indeed, never will any one of the ibn al-Da'i, the lowest of the low and the cruel oppressors, ever rule over us. Ali al-Akbar then says to them, Adribkum bis-sayfi wa uhami an abi. I shall strike you with my sword as I defend my father. Dharbun ghulamun hashimiyun karashi. I shall strike you with my sword, a strike that is Hashimi, a strike that is Karashi. Fi'lan Ali al-Akbar dispersed the ranks of the enemies, killing 120 of the kuffar, leading them to Jahannam wa bi'sal masir. The narrations mention that as Ali al-Akbar was doing his jihad, Imam al-Hussain would stand at the door of the tent watching the jihad of Ali al-Akbar. Every time Ali al-Akbar would kill someone, every time Ali al-Akbar would defend himself and would progress in the jihad, his father would stand at the door and he would smile. He was smiling every time Ali al-Akbar was progressing in the battlefield. But there came at one time when the enemies started to surround Ali al-Akbar from every direction. So there was a la'in by the name of Bukair ibn Ghanim who was trying to attack Ali al-Akbar from the back. When Imam al-Hussain saw this, his entire complexion changed and fear came across his face, grief came across his face. Allah. As Imam al-Hussain was watching the jihad of Ali al-Akbar, look at this silsila. Imam al-Hussain is looking at Ali al-Akbar and Layla is looking at Imam al-Hussain, the mother of Ali al-Akbar. Yani Layla could not see the jihad of Ali al-Akbar, Sayyida Layla, but she saw that so long as Imam al-Hussain is smiling, so long as Imam al-Hussain is content, she knew that Ali al-Akbar is safe. But when Bukair ibn Ghanim was trying to attack Ali al-Akbar and Imam al-Husain's complexion changed, Sayyida Layla came and she said, Ya Aba Abdullah, is my son Ali al-Akbar okay? Is my son Ali fine? Imam al-Hussain looked towards Layla and he said to her, oh Layla, go into the tent and do dua, for indeed the duas of a mother are mustajab. The narrations mention Sayyida Layla went into the khaymaga. She raised her hands up in dua. She said, look at the dua of Layla. She raises her hands up in dua. She says, Ya Radda Yusuf ila Yaqub, Ya Radda Ismail ila Hajar. She cried out, oh Allah, that Allah who returned Yusuf to Yaqub. Ya Allah, that Allah who returned Ismail to Hajar. Allah. What wasila does a mother use at this time? Look at the wasila of Sayyida Layla. What was the wasila? She said, Ilahi bi ghurbatil Hussain. Ya Allah, by the ghurba of Hussain. Allah, Allah. What is the grief in this mother? What is the grief in the heart of this mother? Look at her wasila. She raises her hand. She says, Ilahi bi atashil Hussain. Ya Allah, I'm asking you by the thirst of Hussain. Allah, Allah, what wasila? She says, Ilahi bi wahdatil Hussain. Ilahi, by the loneliness of Hussain, Rudda ilayya waladi Ali. I'm asking you by the thirst of Imam al-Hussain, return my son back to Ali. Layla finished the dua. Over there in the Maidan, Imam al-Hussain struck Bukair ibn Ghanim and sent him to Jahannam wa bi'sal masir. Ahibba'i, du'as of a mother are always mustajab. Ali al-Akbar, the son of Haydar, the son of Sayyid al-Shuhada on the Maidan on his horse, looking at the enemies. Not a single one of them has the courage to come forward. Ali ibn Akbar calls them for challenges. Not one of them is ready. When he sees that none of them are ready, and they are cowards as they are, he returns back to the Khaybaga. Allah! He returns back to the Khaybaga. He gets off his horse, he hugs his father, Abu Abdullah. He says to him, "Oh father, the intensity of the heat and the weight of the armor has increased my thirst, Ya Abu Abdullah." How ghareeb is this father that he is not able to quench the thirst of his son. Allah, Allah. Imam al-Hussain says to him, he hugs his son, he begins to cry, he puts his hands on the forehead of Ali al-Akbar, he kisses him on the forehead and he says to him, "Oh Ali, it is only a little while, a little bit more sabr and your grandfather is going to quench your thirst with a cup from the pond of Kawthar." Allah, Ali al-Akbar wants to return back to the battlefield for the jihad. Imam al-Hussain says to him, "Go and bid farewell to your mother for a final time." It is the right from Sayyida Layla. She has done a dua for Ali al-Akbar. Ali al-Akbar enters into the Khaybaga. All the women from the Khaybaga stand up. Zainab throws herself on Ali al-Akbar. Kulthum throws herself. Sukaina throws herself. Allah, Ali al-Akbar bids farewell to all the women. He finally comes to his mother, Sayyida Layla. Sayyida Layla is on the corner. She's weeping and weeping. She sees Ali al-Akbar. She stands up for his son. Ali al-Akbar says to her mother, "Why are you crying?" Sayyida Layla says, "How can I not cry when my son is walking towards death? Look at what happens." Ali al-Akbar puts his hand on the shoulders of his mother. He says, "Oh mother, tomorrow do you not want to tell Sayyida Fatima al-Zahra that you gave your son in sacrifice in exchange for the life of her son?" As soon as Ali al-Akbar took the name of Sayyida Fatima, Layla stopped crying. Ya Sadat, the Masaib of Sayyida Zahra, the narrations mention Yawmul Qiyamah, when on the day of judgment, when everybody is raised in the mahshar, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will raise Imam al-Hussain from the qabr. The body of Imam al-Hussain will be brought in the mahshar without a head. When Sayyida Zahra sees this, she will scream in such a manner that the fire of Jahannam might fall. Allah. Ali al-Akbar bids farewell to his mother, Sayyida Layla. He bids farewell to his mother. He's coming out of the Khaybaga. The last words he says to his father, Abu Abdullah, he says, "Ya abati usika bi ummi khayra." He says, "Oh my father, my final wasiyah is take care of my mother Layla." Ali al-Akbar rides upon here. Ali al-Akbar embarks upon his horse. He goes towards the Maidan. As he goes towards the Maidan, he looks behind towards his father for a final time. Ali al-Akbar attacks the enemies one final time, but the enemies did not have the courage, so they attacked him in every direction. Umar ibn Sa'ad said, "Waylakum, this youth from the Hashimi shall destroy the enemy. Attack him from every direction." They surrounded his horse, one of them throwing a large number, shooting arrows on Ali al-Akbar, a large number of them throwing spears towards Ali al-Akbar, others on swordsmen, others with stones. Ali al-Akbar protected and defended himself. He got the enemies on one side, and while he was concentrating on the enemies from the front, a person by the name of Murra ibn Munkid came with a spear. He attacked Ali al-Akbar from the back. The Maktal says, "Fata'anahu bi rumhihi fi dhahri." He launched a spear into the back of Ali al-Akbar. The extent with which he put the spear, it came out from the stomach of Ali al-Akbar on his horse. A spear has been launched into his back. As he with the sword on his head. Ali al-Akbar is bleeding, so he held on. Ali al-Akbar is bleeding, so he holds on to the horse's neck. He holds on to the neck of the horse so he doesn't fall down. Allah, Allah. As he holds on to the neck of the horse, the blood from the head of Ali al-Akbar is falling onto the face of the horse. The horse is running but cannot see where it is running. So it ran into the ranks of the enemies. Every one of the enemies struck Ali. The Maktal says, فَقَدَّمُوهُ إِرْمًا إِرْمًا. They cut Ali al-Akbar to pieces. He fell down from the horse. He cried out, "Alayka minni salam, ya abata, ya Aba Abdullah." Sayyidah Sukaina says that when Imam al-Hussain heard the cry of his son Ali al-Akbar, he went running out of the khayma, but he ran out in the opposite direction. Sayyidah Sukaina says, "Oh my father, the cry of Ali al-Akbar came from there, but you are running there." Imam al-Hussain replied, "Oh Sukaina, do not blame me, I lost my eyesight with the cry." Don't ask me how Imam al-Hussain reached Ali al-Akbar. Now you are with Ali al-Akbar. Those who have gone for ziyarah, Ya Allah, and those who have not gone for ziyarah, give us a chance to visit Imam al-Hussain in Karbala, Ya Allah. But those who have gone for the ziyarah, I tell you, take your hearts to the maqam of Ali al-Akbar. Take your hearts to the maqam of Ali al-Akbar. You are watching this manzar. Ali al-Akbar is down on the ground. Imam al-Hussain reaches in and sees his son covered in blood lying on the place. The narration mentions Imam al-Hussain sat next to his head. Imam al-Hussain put his cheek on the cheek of Ali al-Akbar. His cheek on the cheek of Ali al-Akbar. He wiped the sand, he wiped the blood from the face of Ali al-Akbar. He put the lamb head of Ali al-Akbar on his lap. Ali al-Akbar had his hand on his chest. Allah. And then he looks at his father, he smiles, and then he turns away and there is tears coming down his eyes. Imam al-Hussain says to him, "Waladi ya Ali." He says, "Oh my son, ya Ali." Ali al-Akbar says to him, "Oh my father, I'm smiling because I can see Rasulullah. I can see my grandmother Fatima. I can see my grandfather Ali. He's holding a cup from the pond of Kawthar. He's telling me, 'Ya Ali, drink from it.' And they're also saying, 'Baba, come towards us.'" Allah, Imam al-Hussain begins to weep. Imam al-Hussain is weeping. He moves the hat, he moves the hands of his son. He sees that there is a broken spear launched in the heart of Ali al-Akbar. It's causing Ali al-Akbar grief. The narration mentions, the narration I have read from the part of the Makta, it mentions that Imam al-Hussain put one hand on the chest of Ali al-Akbar. He put one hand on the